Another NATO ally appears to be distancing itself from Volodymyr Zelensky, adding to growing questions about Western unity after recent political setbacks and diplomatic challenges faced by Ukraine and its supporters. French President Emmanuel Macron has drawn a clear red line on Europe's role in the conflict, insisting that the European Union cannot claim neutrality because it has openly supported Ukraine and imposed sanctions on Russia. Reports of European Council President Antonio Costa's office maintaining contacts with senior Russian officials have triggered controversy, raising a debate within Europe over whether such outreach represents necessary diplomacy or a risky political move. Even as internal disagreements emerge over negotiations with Moscow, the European Union has demonstrated its continued pressure campaign by extending its sanctions against Russia for an unprecedented full-year period. Europe's pressure strategy may now widen beyond Russia, with reports suggesting the European Union is preparing new sanctions targeting entities in China, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates over alleged support for Moscow's war effort. French President Emmanuel Macron said the European Union cannot act as a neutral mediator between Kiev and Moscow, arguing that Europe has already taken a clear position by providing support to Ukraine. Macron stressed that the European Union's extensive sanctions against Russia prevent it from presenting itself as an impartial intermediary in any future negotiations between the two sides. The French leader also criticized European Council President Antonio Costa's outreach towards Russia, sparking fresh debate over how Europe should engage with Moscow during efforts to end the conflict. Macron argued that while Costa could participate in discussions within his institutional role, he does not possess the authority to offer security guarantees on behalf of individual European nations. The French president's remarks highlighted growing differences inside Europe over the strategy towards Russia, exposing a broader divide between maintaining pressure on Moscow and pursuing diplomatic engagement.
We are not mediators. We stand with Ukraine. We are providing it with aid and support, and we have imposed sanctions on Russia. A second point, very simple and very clear, that we have always stood up for. When negotiations take place, Europeans must be at the table, because Europe's interests are at stake, interests that are partly linked to what is happening in Ukraine through the aid we have provided, through the issue of enlargement that concerns Europeans, and also through the financial support and loans we have been able to provide under the relevant financial regulation. And so the European Union must be represented, and European Council President Antonio Costa, within the scope of his defined responsibilities, will have a seat at the table. That said, the member states will also have their place there. He cannot represent them when it comes to security guarantees, which will be a key element of any negotiations.
On June 17th, Bloomberg reported that an advisor to European Council President Antonio Costa held 2 telephone conversations with a senior Russian official believed to be close to President Vladimir Putin. The reported contacts between Costa's office and Russian officials reportedly triggered anger among several European Union member states, exposing tensions over the bloc's diplomatic approach towards Moscow. According to DPA, Costa's office later confirmed that the contacts with Russia were intended to keep diplomatic channels open amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Costa's office also clarified that the conversations did not involve formal negotiations or any significant exchange of views regarding a potential settlement. However, Politico reported that a majority of European leaders at the summit supported Costa's effort to maintain communication channels with Russia. The differing reactions to the contacts highlighted broader divisions within the European Union over whether continued isolation or limited diplomatic engagement is the better approach towards Russia. The European Union has agreed to extend its sanctions against Russia for another year over Moscow's ongoing war in Ukraine, signaling the bloc's continued commitment to maintaining economic pressure on the Kremlin. According to reports, the sanctions will continue to target key sectors of the Russian economy, including its financial system, energy industry, and defense sector. The latest decision marks the first time that the European Union has renewed its Russia sanctions package for a full 12-month period instead of the previous 6-month cycle. Earlier sanctions extensions required unanimous approval from all EU member states every 6 months, often creating repeated diplomatic negotiations over their continuation. European officials believe the annual extension will provide greater predictability and certainty for businesses, financial institutions, and governments responsible for implementing the restrictions. The EU has steadily expanded its sanctions regime since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, adding restrictions across multiple strategic sectors. Reports also suggest that the European Union is preparing additional measures that could target companies based in China, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Azerbaijan over alleged support for Russia. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov criticized the European Union's approach, describing its simultaneous pursuit of sanctions and involvement in peace negotiations as a contradictory and strange policy. Amid an uptick in Russian strikes on Kiev, Ukraine has suffered a fresh political and military blow, underscoring how external pressure is now being compounded by growing strains with key partners. Poland has suspended the transfer of MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine over an unresolved dispute, abruptly pausing a high-profile aid package that Kiev had hoped would boost its aging air fleet. The dispute centers on access to Ukrainian drone technology, with the outlet Militarny reporting that Warsaw wants clearer terms on how it can tap into Kiev's hard-won expertise in unmanned systems. A Polish defense official said Warsaw expects to benefit from Ukraine's advanced know-how on UAVs, signaling that Poland sees tech cooperation as part of the price for continuing high-end military support. Defense Minister Tomasz Tomczyk stated that the fighter jets will be delivered only after the matter is settled, effectively tying the timing of the MiG-29 transfer to agreement on drone technology cooperation. Under the proposed arrangement, Poland could transfer up to 9 MiG-29s to Ukraine in exchange for structured access to Ukrainian drone capabilities, making the jets part of a broader quid pro quo. Notably, Ukraine's president has said Kiev agreed to those terms of cooperation, suggesting that from Ukraine's perspective the conditions are acceptable and that the delay reflects remaining Polish concerns or technicalities. Polish officials are justifying the decision to hand over the aircraft by pointing to the end of operational service life of the MiG-29s, arguing that the jets are nearing retirement in Polish service and can be better used by Ukraine in the interim. The move is expected to form part of a broader NATO effort to strengthen the alliance's eastern flank while supporting Ukraine, with surplus legacy platforms cascading to Kiev as frontline states modernize their own air forces. Poland plans to replace the MiG-29s with modern F-16 Fighting Falcons and South Korean-built KAIF A-5050 fighter aircraft, a transition that will significantly upgrade Warsaw's air capabilities and deepen interoperability with other NATO air forces. Significantly, the suspension of the deal came just days after Poland stripped President Zelensky of a top national honor, a symbolic snub that highlights how wartime solidarity has frayed and how historical and political grievances are now reshaping the relationship. Polish President Karol Nawrocki has revoked the Order of the White Eagle that had previously been awarded to Volodymyr Zelensky, marking a significant development in relations between the two countries. The move followed Kiev's decision to honor a military unit that uses traditions associated with the UPA. The issue has reignited long-standing historical tensions between Poland and Ukraine. Zelensky granted the title Heroes of the UPA to a special operations unit in late May. The recognition drew criticism from several political figures in Poland. The UPA was the armed wing of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists during World War II. The group remains a highly controversial part of the region's history. Poland holds the UPA responsible for mass killings of Poles, Jews, and other minorities during the war. These events continue to shape historical debates between the two nations. Nawrocki said that historical truth cannot become a bargaining chip in political relations. He stressed that certain historical issues should not be compromised for diplomatic reasons. The Polish president also said that preserving the memory of the victims remains a moral duty of the Polish state. He described remembrance as a responsibility owed to future generations. Nawrocki stated that at least 100,000 Polish citizens were killed by the UPA. He cited this figure while explaining his opposition to honoring the group. He further described Ukraine's glorification of the organization as insulting and deeply disappointing. According to Nawrocki, such actions undermine efforts to build mutual understanding.
Pozostaje przede wszystkim formacją odpowiedzialną za
The Ukrainian Insurgent Army, UPA, remains above all a formation responsible for the cruel crimes committed against citizens of the Republic of Poland during World War II. The position of the Polish state on this matter has been known for years. In 2016, the Sejm of the Republic of Poland recognized a crime committed by the OUN and UPA as genocide. By virtue of this act, July 11th was established as a national day of remembrance for the victims of genocide committed by Ukrainian nationalists in 2025. This was also confirmed by the power of a special law. Facts are not subject to negotiation. They do not change with the political climate or need. Therefore, naming one of the Ukrainian military units after UPA criminals has a significance that goes far beyond Ukraine's domestic affairs. Poland has repeatedly signaled to the Ukrainian side the special importance of this issue. We conveyed our position and the expectation of a reconsideration of the consequences of this decision for relations between our states. Ultimately, the position of the Ukrainian side did not change. History should not be an obstacle to the future. A good future can, however, only be built on truth. Poland has repeatedly shown that it is capable of shaping the future beyond the burden of the past, but never at the expense of memory. Over recent years, we have consistently built relations with Ukraine based on partnership and dialogue. After I took office as president, together with the president of Ukraine, we made an effort to rebuild trust in areas that remained a source of tension. The return of the Church of St. Nicholas in Kiev, consents for the search and exhumation of Polish victims in Ostroki, Wola Ostrowiecka, Huta Pieniaka, Halosko, from the fields in Igli, our cousins were a signal that, despite a difficult history, agreement is possible. All these actions provided a basis for believing that Poland and Ukraine are gradually finding a path to lasting reconciliation. That is why the decision of the Ukrainian authorities to glorify the UPA is not only outrageous, it is also incomprehensible and deeply disappointing. It strikes not only at historical memory, it also strikes at the trust built over the years and over recent months. It strikes at the foundation of reconciliation. It strikes at the conviction that truth can be the common language of our nations. We did what we could to save our neighbors. At this terrible moment, Poland provided unprecedented humanitarian, political, economic, and military assistance. We urge other nations to provide rapid assistance. Today, over 1.5 million Ukrainians live in Poland. The scale of the financial assistance we have provided to fighting Ukraine amounts to billions of zlotys. As a commander-in-chief of the armed forces, I must also recall that the Polish military has trained thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. Today, we cannot remain indifferent to the fact that some of them will now serve under the banner of the UPA. This is unacceptable to us. I do not recall these numbers and data to demand gratitude, but I recall them so that everyone understands why the decision of the President of Ukraine arouses such immense opposition in us. Therefore, in light of President Volodymyr Zelensky's consent to name one of the units of the armed forces of Ukraine after UPA heroes, after consultation with the chapter, I have decided to strip the President of Ukraine of the Order of the White Eagle. At this point, I want to emphasize that this decision is not against the Ukrainian nation. It does not signify a change in the strategic direction of Polish security policy. We have supported and continue to support Ukraine because we know that Russian aggression poses a threat to the security of Poland and the whole of Europe. Nothing has changed in this assessment. Poland remains ready to cooperate with Ukraine. Poland remains supporter of dialogue. But Poland will consistently guard the memory of its citizens and the dignity of its own state symbols. Poland will defend its national interests and values. Poland will not agree to the glorification of those who murdered defenseless Polish civilians. Ukraine's path to European structures also requires a readiness to honestly face the difficult pages of its own history. A united Europe was built on the rejection of totalitarianism and the cult of violence. These principles must apply to everyone. For those who do not understand this, there can be no place in the European Union, and Poland will certainly not allow that. Ukraine should also remember that nothing serves the Kremlin's interest more than a conflict between Poles and Ukrainians. There are limits that must not be crossed in Polish-Ukrainian relations. It is also an appeal to our neighbors, return to the path of truth and mutual respect. Ladies and gentlemen, this is also a lesson for us. We cannot remain indifferent to the affirmation of symbols of crime.